I think it's everything that you've taught us is it's kind of that one flesh. And when she feels safe and secure, respected, and heard, then all the stress is let away. And look, she may talk and complain and do all those things, but that's your job just to absorb it as a man, to be a true man, and just absorb it and understand she may just be wanting an vent. And then when she's done, you just say, hey, we done? I'm here for you if you need to go more, hold her tight, let her know you're there for her.
What do you feel like I do train in that for men?
Yeah, and it's look, I'll be very honest with the listeners. I was petrified at the beginning. I'm like, okay, great. This woman is well known, well respected, and has done some amazing things in a lot of marriages and a lot of inspirational things. But she's a female, and my wife's a female, and I thought it was going to be just like a gang fest. And no, I mean, what has happened throughout this is, surprisingly, there's been some calls where I've gone in and I'm like, oh shit, I don't want to have this conversation, but here's the situation. And one of the things you do teach is like, no, you stand up for yourself. If you want to go take a nap, for example, then you go take a nap. But have some, hey, I'm gonna go take a nap, but when I wake back up, I'm gonna go through these things. Or hey, myself travel a good bit for work is let your wife know well in advance. And look, you're in power and you're in control. This is definitely not a training where it's beat up the male. What I've experienced through this entire process is I've been more empowered as a man, but it's the tools that you use. And I think men so often feel that they have to fight, be loud, even with your spouse, but there's other ways to do it. And even scripture teaches that too. Like be silent and humble, but when it's time to speak, be very blunt and quick.
Well, because inadequacy is the thing that men fight the most. That's why y'all are running from your houses. And, even if you're not doing anything, seedy on the outside of your house, you're still not there and you're walking on eggshells. And that is an awful
Yep.
position for any person. But for a man, that's just goes against your total nature. But y'all
Yep.
don't know what to do. And so then y'all just wind up just doing the routine and the groundhog day and then trying to stay at work. And then I think y'all run into other problems because y'all do have that inadequacy thing at the core, which y'all are very adequate. God made y'all adequate. He made y'all with dominion over everything, and so he wouldn't make something inadequate as that. It's just maneuvering through some of these things and feeling like she doesn't think you're inadequate. I always say she needs more of you than less than you. And y'all think that giving her less of you will get you out of her way. Because you guys are just waiting for the next chore she gives you. You feed the kids, do homework with the kids, whatever. You're like, God, I've been working all day long. How do you look at that a little differently now without that resentment, now that you have some understanding about that dynamic?
Yeah. So two things. And this is not me as a man at all, but going back to what society defines as what a man should and how he should behave, I think is the core root of society right now. To your point, God made men physically bigger than women, but he also made them built differently in how we handle situations. And it's different, but you shouldn't retreat to your wife just because oh well, I have to give all authority and all power over to her. No, that's what I've learned is that's a recipe for disaster, especially if you have children, because then the children behave a bit differently. My wife and I had an argument the other day, and two of the kids walked in and saw it. And as a man, I could have quickly been like, go back upstairs. Why are you still awake? But instead, the next morning, what I did is I sat the kids down. I said, you guys both sit next to mom, and dad's going to talk to you. So they went in the room, sat next to mom. She was kind of confused what was happening. And I apologized the way that I spoke to their mother, because to me, that is, although not a loud and powerful moment, it's a very bold moment where I'm teaching my boys how to treat women. And I simply sat down to him and I said, look, the way that I spoke to your mother the other day was not okay. And that's not how we treat women. Women are queens, they're delicate flowers, and they lean on us to protect them. And you can't protect them if you are belittling or talking down to, or even just disrespecting your wives. So, there's much deeper impacts generationally how you behave as a man. And, I think that we have to get back to the core of little boys realizing that their fathers are powerful physically, but also very powerful emotionally
Mhm.
by not being the loudest person in the room. So, as it relates to coming home, a while back, one of my former bosses taught me this. He goes, look, you have a lot of kids. When you get home, things are going to be crazy. That's the first moment that your children see you. It's the second moment that your wife likely has seen you that day. It is imperative that they see a dad that is energized. And, one of the things that he always mentioned is there was this tree that any issues that were at work that had nothing to do with the family, he would hang them on the tree and walk in with a lot of energy. And, I don't think you should leave your wife out of the issues. I think it's important to have those conversations because she feels included in your day. But emotionally, you have to reset. So if you come home to a crazy home, don't just go do the dishes because your wife's going to nag you and, you know, or I better do this or I'm going to get yelled at anyway. Be a man, go in there, and you may tell, kid number one, hey, you're going to go help your little brother with the dishes. I'm going to go over here and knock this out for mom, and we're going to have a great evening. So, really having the power and the control of just, lack of a better phrases, being a guy that's landing planes all day. You're just pointing directions, and that relieves your wife because now she's not going to have to yell at the kid. She's not going to have to stress about the dishes. And, again, it's not, in my opinion, it's not you just like slinking back by doing whatever your wife's told. It's being a leader, and it's seeing the problem and just knocking it out.
Mhm.
And guess what? Your wife doesn't have to tell you thank you. The thank you will come in other ways.
Right. And I think you can testify that the thank you comes from her feeling that protection of that leadership. And then she began, I always say she's going to slide under like butter. She begins to do naturally what you want her to do in your life, give you
Right.
more time, give you more sexuality, give you more affection, give you more affirmations,
Mhm.
all the things that the male needs from the female to be desired kind of start coming naturally as he heads up the house. Is that
Mhm.
what you've experienced?
Yeah, 100%. And I'll say this, I don't, depending on your listeners when they were born, but nothing was worse than if you and your brother messed up something and your mom would say, wait till your dad gets home. Because your wife knew that your husband was going to take care of the situation. And then you as a child you're like, oh wow, if this is escalated to dad, this is an issue. But yeah, it's look, my wife hates and loves the you're going to flow in like butter, but I've personally experienced that. If you're and again, it's not checking boxes, it's being your true self, being authentic. Everything that you've taught us, there's a certain way that you take away what those tools are and how you use them in your marriage. But yeah, without a doubt, I mean, I think you and I've had conversations a few times where I was like, Suzette, I don't even know like where is this coming from. But again, I think it's everything that you've taught us is it's kind of that one flesh. And when she feels safe and secure, respected, and heard, then all the stress is let away. And look, she may talk and complain and do all those things, but that's your job just to absorb it as a man, to be a true man, and just absorb it and understand she may just be wanting an vent. And then when she's done, you just say, hey, we done? I'm here for you if you need to go more, hold her tight, let her know you're there for her. And look, if you don't ask for it and you're not begging for it, and you're just being a true, authentic, godly man, then the fruits of what most men love the most, including myself, just naturally happens.
Mhm. So my last comment about the one flesh, what would you tell men to sum up what the one flesh really means and what you've learned what it really means where you didn't know before? What would you tell them to understand it better?
Yeah, I think to understand it, it's just, how it's as simple as like how would you feel if this occurred to you? How would you feel if you were treated this way? How would you feel if your wife just didn't hear anything that you say? It's a bond in marriage when you're at the altar. That's fantastic. But it truly becomes one flesh whenever you're working in unison. When your wife can fully trust you and look at you as the head of the household, and you feel that both emotionally, physically, and verbally, like that's one flesh. And again, when I first heard it, I'm like, oh yeah, that's great, I've heard that. But as you start using the tools and start truly living it in real life and behaving in a certain way, and look, every day's not rainbows, and it'd be a boring life if it was. But understanding that the core, you want to get back to that one flesh is kind of the pentacle of where you want to be in your marriage.
Mhm. And what would you say about integrity in a man?
It's look, I think early on, I'm a big history buff. Like early on, the name of who you were, your last name, held integrity. And when people said your name, throughout history, it's kind of like, what do you want your legacy to be known as? And a legacy is fine, but I always morbidly say, like, how many people would actually show up to your funeral if you died young? And I think integrity is truly just being a true and honest person. Nothing's more difficult than being an angry individual, a hothead, someone that lies. It becomes very difficult, and your life becomes very scrambled, as opposed to just doing the right thing every time and asking yourself and asking, even stopping and asking God, like, what would what would you feel this way? And then if you're doing something seedy or shady, and you can just simply, like in today's world, you and I talk about this, like electronics and social media destroys marriages and society. Like, what if every picture text that you sent was CC'd to your wife and to God? How'd you feel? Would
Mhm.
it be worth sending?
Great concept. Great concept. Well, Ian, I want to talk to you some more about this. I think you'll be instrumental in helping me wake up the guys to say, if this is not that hard, we can do
Yeah.
this, fellas, to get men back in dominion and save our families, our marriages, and our society as a result of the men understanding what is required of them instead of just constantly being beat down by their wives, the society, etc., being the men God wants us to be.